Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. Today we have Sam Richter, keynote speaker and expert and thought leader in digital intelligence. Thank you for joining us, Sam Richter. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's really an honor to be with you.
Of course, thank you. We'd love to kind of get a little bit of understanding, like what is keynote speaker and what does what do you speak on in terms of like as a thought leader around digital intelligence? What does that mean
Yeah.
to the typical lay person if they were to ask?
Well, to me, digital intelligence is really how do you find information about other people
Mm.
so you can be relevant? So really the core message is relevance. In today's world, in particular, there's so much information that we're bombarded on, and as buyers, we obviously can go on Google and find just about anything anywhere in the globe. So how do you differentiate yourself as a seller?
Yeah.
And understanding that people are massively passionate about themselves. And so why, as a seller, when we have a meeting over Zoom or send an email or in person, why do we end up always talking about ourselves when we know that the buyer is passionate about themselves? They don't care about us.
Yeah.
How do we find information on them to make sure the first words out of our mouths are about them? And that led me to not only do keynote speeches, about 100 a year all over the globe. Then I also now develop AI powered, well, I've been doing that for about 15 years, AI powered technologies to enable what I help people discover. And in the last 2.5 years, generative AI as well. So now I also am asked to give a lot of programs on generative AI. And by the
Okay.
way, why that's different than AI. Um, and that expands it a little bit beyond the sales space to really include all aspects of an organization.
Yeah. Super interesting. I want to dive in pretty deeply there as we get towards the second half of this
Uh-huh.
conversation. But why don't you like lead us up to the point of how you became an expert in this field, right? I noticed just kind of like scrolling through your work history and experiences that you've been in advertising, you've been in marketing, an executive in those spaces. What was that previous chapter of your career like? And then what led you to really kind of like getting into the weeds and becoming super
Mhm.
granular around this topic specifically?
Yeah, great question. So, yeah, I was an advertising copywriter, became a creative director for a firm, and was doing really well. Loved it. Got invited to become a public relations professional, and thought, well, that would be a wonderful opportunity to expand my knowledge of marketing. And I had the opportunity to work some great mentors, wonderful people at one of the world's largest PR firms. Microsoft was a client of ours, so we uh, got involved. I helped manage the account, and really that's where my introduction to technology. About the same time, Google was coming out, so I was really learning about Google, and I actually, I guess, got pretty good at it because the PR agency asked me to go around and start giving uh, presentations to many of their local offices. It was a global firm, so it had offices all over. So all the different offices, and the title of that presentation was "The Little Engine That Could." And how to use Google. And what's funny is a lot of those techniques are still in my core presentation. Obviously, it's better and different now.
Yeah.
Um, then moved on to work for a large e-commerce company during the dot-com boom. We managed about 90% of software downloads in the world. And I would go to trade shows and I would speak about how do you do we were really innovators in things like banner ads and email marketing. Like nobody was doing those things at the time, so I would speak about how to do that and teach people how to do that on stage. And then of course say, if you just want someone to do it all for you, we've got our trade show booth in the back. Go check out those folks, and we'll do it all for you. And that generated millions of dollars in revenue.
Mm.
Fast forward, I had the opportunity to lead the world's largest nonprofit business research organization. It was a library with the thought that, okay, how are we going to digitize this information, make it available to the world, which we did. We became the library for SBA, Small Business Administration, SBDC. Was really successful, really fun, and it was a nonprofit organization, so we didn't have any money. I mean, and so to advertise, so the only way to advertise was me go out and speak, and people would start to pay the nonprofit. They would offer an honorarium to the nonprofit, which was awesome. And then on the back end, I would kind of the same things I learned at the e-commerce company. I'm going to help you discover how to do all of this on your own. But if you want, you could just become a member of the library, and we'll do it all for you. Well, fast forward, kept getting asked to write a book. So I wrote a book, which became 12 books, bestsellers.
Mm.
People kept saying, hey, we'll pay you to speak. So that was kind of the journey. Never really intended it to be that way, just came out that way.
Yeah, it sounds super organic. So it seems like you started off, just really being an expert within an organization and then kind of
Yeah,
got to the helm there. And then I guess you found that you also liked it, right? I mean,
yeah.
you wouldn't have kept on doing it if you didn't, but was good at it, but also the combination of like liking and enjoying it. What about speaking and I guess maybe like teach some aspect of teaching involved there? It's not for everybody. What about it that did you gravitate towards and what do you love about it?
Sure, a couple things. Well, I'm a former football player, and so I love the competitive nature of things. And I mean, I guess I've way toned down my competitive nature as I've gotten older. But I still love from the competitive side. What I mean is more internally competitive. It's like when I'm going on stage, I can't screw up, right? It
Mm,
has to be perfect every time. And so I'm performing in front of an audience. So I love that part of it. I love sharing and the energy involved in a weird way. I mean, I'm actually a huge introvert, like going to the receptions before
yeah, I
the
feel
conferences, like, oh my God, do I have to do this? After I'm fine because they've all seen me, right? And
yeah,
but that also is it's even beforehand. I mean, I've learned that I use what I share with others. How do you find information on others? So before even the reception, I already know a lot of the people in the crowd, so it makes me feel more comfortable.
yeah,
Um, so that really is on the speaking side. And then, like I said, I created a number of technologies. I'm not a coder, I'm not a developer, but I learned all that. So I build those too. So it kind of what I love about what I do now is half the time I spend coding and building new things and creating stuff out of scratch and then selling it and marketing it, and it's fun. I mean, it's fun to make money on a recurring revenue. Um, so it's like half my time is spent, for lack of a better term, the math side of my brain, and half the time is spent on the creative side of my brain, which is developing really, my presentations are filled with animation and video. It's just kind of cool stuff. So just being able to create is kind of fun.
yeah. Speak to us a little bit about the products that you've been
Sure.
building. Saying, you're not necessarily a technical person, but did you learn coding or do you work with a team of developers? And
Learned it all on my own,
oh, wow, okay,
basically looking at YouTube videos and things. Yeah, occasionally I would go on to Fiverr or Upwork. If I
sure,
had like a specific JavaScript problem that I couldn't figure out, I'd get help from that. Now I use generative AI to help me with those things, which is
yeah,
stunning.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, what I did is was really simple. So a lot of speakers have online courses, and I had one which was very successful, and I was in the shower one day thinking, okay, what new video should I create? And I'm like, nobody wants a video. They just want a tool that does it for them.
yeah,
So I thought, I'm going to go build a search engine. So I built a search engine, it worked really well. And then I thought, what am I doing? And there's this little company called Google. I don't think I'll be able to compete with them. So then I developed a system that uses AI. It's almost like a search engine overlay. So it helps you
okay,
search Google, LinkedIn, a few million other curated sources. So these are sources that I've curated and said, you don't have to worry about, they're good. Um, how do you, so the tool actually searches the free web, for lack of a better term, way faster than you could
yep,
do on your own. So it uses AI to run, for example, sometimes 800 simultaneous searches in a second. Generative AI came out and doing the same thing with generative AI. So, which is fun. It's scary because this technology is changing so fast. So I spend a third of my time now speaking, a third of my time building, and a third of my time learning
yeah,
because this is changing so quickly. Kind of stay on the cutting edge is a little bit difficult sometimes, but I
yeah,
seem to be managing.
fair enough. Um, I'm curious as to just kind of, going from working in more of a corporate setting and then
Yeah,
going venturing on your own. What kind of, it seems like it was pretty, it was a step-by-step process. It wasn't like a
yeah.
very binary decisions like some founders where it's like, spoken to a few of them the past few days where it just that they set a cutoff point. But was there something that kind of inspired you or motivated you to ultimately like make that transition or leap? It seems like there probably was quite a bit of like just social proof that you're gathering while you're still being in the corporate world,
Yeah.
and made it a little bit easier, but don't want to put words in your mouth. So curious as to like what that was experience was like for you.
Yeah, it was social proof. The board of the organization, I was on the nonprofit organization because we were generating money, but just not enough. And so they decided to go back to their original mission of being more of a library and an event center. And that really wasn't a good fit for me. So frankly, I got fired.
Got it.
And so it was kind of made for me, but it was fine. I had a nice, one of my best friends owned a company where they needed a VP of marketing. So I came in and worked with him, and it was in the financial services space. So anytime I spoke in the financial services space, they paid that company. Anytime I was speaking outside of the financial services space, they paid me. It was a wonderful arrangement. And, so again, social proof kind of said, now is the time. And then my book was doing really well. So I had the opportunity to, frankly, sock away about a year's worth of living expenses. So even though I had young kids at the time and a new house at the time, I was like, I feel comfortable doing this.
Yeah,
I have enough confidence. And if I screw up, I can always go back to corporate.
fair enough. That's a interesting way to kind of take it. Um, Want to dive into a little bit more about this idea of digital intelligence. I mean, you spoke about it just briefly earlier around, sellers talking about themselves or talking about their product, right? And I see this a ton of times just working with startups and their go-to-market motions. And that's something that I have to get over, which is like you want to, talk to the pain point of the buyer, right? And get
Yeah.
as many head nods and lean ins as you can by asking the right questions, at least like how I kind of position it. And hopefully by the end of it, they're asking you, what is this product? What is the solution you have? Like this Band-Aid or first aid kit that you can propose.
Mhm.
But would love to kind of get your, if you have a overarching philosophy, or I'm sure it's pretty widespread, but if there's an overarching philosophy, right? How do you think about it? How do you contextualize it for somebody who is like a startup, who's maybe a technical founder that, sales and marketing is not their primary language? And love to kind of get your thoughts and stance on that.
Well, you really just covered my speech, which I love. So we're in perfect alignment. You use the word, or you use the phrase asking questions.
Yeah.
And that's really the key.
Yeah.
Oh, every sales book you've ever read, every sales course you've ever taken, the first chapter, the first hour, they talk about the need to ask great questions. Everybody in all the readers, all the people in the audience nod their head. They, oh yeah, got to ask great questions, got to ask great questions. You know what? You don't have permission to ask great questions.
Yeah.
What do I mean by that? You know, Chris, tell me a little bit about yourself. What's keeping you up at night? How big are you guys? How many employees do you don't have, when you walk in and you ask those kinds of questions, the other person, there's two things going on in their head. A, they're saying to themselves, wow, this person's unprepared.
Yeah.
And then the second thing they're saying is, geez, I wonder what sales training they went to, because that sounds a lot like Carnegie. Or no, that really sounds like Miller Hyman. Nope, that sounds like Sandler, right? That's what's going on. It sounds so formulaic and
Yeah.
not in unauthentic, if that's a word, not
Yeah.
genuine,
Absolutely.
right? So the beautiful thing is when you know something about another person. So what I talk about is relevance, and there's
Yeah.
really three core components of relevance. What is somebody's goals? How can you help them achieve their goals more efficiently, effectively, profitably than they might be able to do on their own? What are their fears? How can you help them alleviate their fears more efficiently, profitably, effectively than they can do on their own? And what are their care abouts? Or as I like to say, how do they get their bonus, right? And
Yep.
so,
Figuring out their motivators. Yeah.
yeah, what are their motivators? So it's finding out what's going on at their company, what's going on in their industry, something interesting about the other person, and starting out the conversation that way. So it could be anything. Hey, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile and I saw that, wow, you play volleyball at the University of Iowa. That's so cool. Can you tell me about that? Or, hey, I was doing a little, before our meeting, I was doing a little research and I saw one of your biggest competitors has just sold off their largest division. What do you think that means to you? Hey, congratulations. I saw you just won best places to work. How did you do that? What makes this such a great place to work? The goal here is talk about something the other person's passionate about, and then be quiet. because they'll spend the next 15 minutes talking about themselves. Now, when they talk about themselves, if you listen rather than think about what the next thing is you are going to say, they're going to share some information where you know that, oh my God, what I sell is a perfect fit for that. Or, oh
Yeah.
gosh, I've worked with that company in the past. Or wow, I've had a similar experience. Listen. And then what will happen is after about 10 minutes or so, or 20 minutes, your prospect will say something along the lines of, oh, I'm so sorry, I've been doing all the talking. Can you tell me a little bit about you and how you might be able to help us? The reality is most entrepreneurs, most people are not salespeople. What are naturally born salespeople? Like wake up in the morning, give me a list, start smiling and dialing, baby, right? But most of us are really good at telling stories.
Mm.
The key is telling relevant stories. So when you mention something, I want to pick up on that and really share with you a relevant story, something where we can make a connection. Um, and when you do that, like I always, I said earlier, I always say that the second most powerful word in sales is the word permission. Like the first most powerful is actually two words. It's I'll buy.
Yeah.
But the second is permission. I want to gain permission by ask those more difficult questions. And the only way you do that is to really genuinely show that you've done your homework and care. The beautiful thing about today's world is, and I can tell you why this is, but salespeople don't, it's crazy that salespeople don't do their homework. And
Yeah.
so those of us who do, it just completely differentiate yourself.
Yeah. Why do you think that is though? I mean, you're speaking, I'm nodding and you're like preaching to the choir here, but
Yeah.
like, I totally get it. And I just see, and I run into this a lot with founders. And I guess like when I'm thinking about personally too, the challenges that I see, number one, why do you think, I guess, like sales people don't do their homework? And if I'm being brutally honest, I feel like salespeople typically in the world of sales or like enterprise sales are maybe like more ego driven individuals. And so I always try to think of like empathy and compassion as part of
Yeah.
selling, incorporating those things for those that are maybe more traditional, like in the B2B space, it's been like that more like, used car salesman kind of like vibe of just,
Yeah.
really hooking it. But I think it's changed a lot in the past few years, especially going forward too. So curious about that, but then also secondarily just be like, uh, how do you teach and how do you advise and break through? Because sometimes it's a personality trait, or like, how do you get them to, and I guess it's not the changing their personality trait, but like maybe helping them identify that weakness
Sure.
and, I mean, and then helping them through that, because a lot of it is self-awareness and sometimes they don't have that awareness. Or even if you tell them like ask questions, their thing is trying to figure out how to scale that up. And so then it does become inauthentic, even if they're asking the exact same thing I would be asking verbatim, the way that the tonality comes across feels like very robotic, and then they get a different response. So, yeah, I'm sure you've run into that before.
Yeah,
So,
a lot there. I think, let's start out with why are salespeople not doing this?
yeah,
I think part of it is sales has gone from a relationship business. And by the way, I don't like relationship. We'll talk about that in a minute why. But a relationship business to a data-driven business. What do I mean? You walk into any decent sized company, they've got a CRM system.
yeah,
Right? And there's really only three levers in sales that you can pull. There are how many calls, we'll call them calls, now a call or a contact. Let's use contact. Contact can be a phone call, in-person meeting, email, social media connection. There are
yeah,
only so many contacts one can make a day. And then so there's really four things. How many contacts? What percentage of those contacts say, send me more information? What percentage of those end up buying?
yeah,
And then what's your average order size? Typically, if you're a sales manager, there's not a lot you can do on the average order size. The price is the price. How many people buy from you? That's typically perceived as not something that can change. I don't believe that perception. How many people are saying, yeah, send me some more information? That's perceived as that's fixed. No, it's not. And so what they do is they tell the salespeople, you got to make more calls. You're not hitting your numbers. You got to make more calls. Now, certainly there's some truth to that. You got to make more calls. But I think we've become so entrenched with data and capturing data that it's not I believe it's not the quantity of, it's like two things can be true at the same time. It's not just the quantity of calls, but
Yeah.
it's the quality of those calls.
Yeah.
Because based on the quality of those calls, or those contacts, excuse me, based on the quality of those contacts, we can influence the other two numbers.
Yep.
We can influence the number of people that say, yeah, send me more information.
Yep.
And we can influence the number of people who say, I'll buy from you. The quality of those calls are really important. Yet what we get bonused on as salespeople is the quantity of calls. So I think that's one of the issues right there is we spend so much time in the CRM system tracking data and all that, and it's important, don't get me wrong, that we don't spend the time doing our homework, focusing on the quality. Now, I told you earlier, we talk about relationships. What does CRM mean? Customer Relationship Management. In most companies, they can tell customers, right? How many times they interact, they attend our webinars, email open rate, how much they order from us, what's their, how many times they contact customer support. We do a really good job of tracking our customers. And oh, by the way, we bonus our marketing team if they can get our email open rates higher. Somebody gets a bonus for improving the customer. On the management side of CRM, companies have done a really good job of automating business processes. Oh, we're going to onboard a new client. We push a button, pull down lever, click a box. It automates business processes. And we bonus our technology people or our information people for creating efficiencies within our organization. I'll ask you, Chris, have you ever given somebody a bonus because of a relationship?
No.
No, because what does it even mean? And do I even need to have a relationship?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that I sell HVAC equipment, air conditioning systems,
Yep.
and I'm going to sell you one in your home. Do you need to know about me? Do you need to know about my wife, how many dogs I have, what religion I am, my political? No, you don't care. Do I need to know some things about you? Yeah, I need to know about your house. Do you have a home office? Are you doing Zoom calls like this where you're going to have lights? It's going to heat up in the summer. So I need to have, different systems to cool different rooms. I need to understand that about you, but you don't need to understand that about me. So the word is not relationship in the traditional sense, maybe
Sure.
business relationship. To me, if I were creating CRM, I would call it customer relevance management because I need to be relevant. So I think that's one of the problems. We spend so much time tracking the C and the M, and we give people bonuses for that, that we forget about the relevance. Now you might be saying, well, Sam, how do I give somebody a bonus for relevance? Which leads into another one of your questions. How do we do this? When I'm speaking, I tell companies, if the audience is leaders, I say, this isn't that difficult. How many of you, show of hands, have a Friday sales meeting? Everybody raises their hands, right? What I'd like you to do is encourage you is to go around either at the beginning or the end of the sales meeting and point to every single person. Joe, what's the biggest client you're working on next week? Oh, it's Widget Corporation. Who's the decision maker? It's Sally Smith. Great. Tell me one thing about Widget Corporation or one thing about Sally that our competitors probably don't know. And if you go around the table and you start instilling, I call it instilling a culture of relevance into the DNA of your organization, you'll be amazed of how all of a sudden that discussion, give it 3 weeks of weekly, how it gets kind of fun, actually. And how somebody will pop in there. Oh, Sally went to the University of Missouri. Well, I went to the University of Missouri. Let me call her, right? It'll get that way.
Yep.
So really embedding a culture of relevance into the DNA of the organization. What I find is when you know something about another person, your prospect or your client, you get excited as a salesperson. For me, as an introvert, it melts my introvertedness away. Like, what? So cool. Now, sometimes you will find information that's just not appropriate to share, right?
Sure.
You know, hey, Joe, congratulations on the second divorce, right? You're not going to go there.
Yeah.
But even when you know something about another person and they don't know that you know it, how does it make you feel? Confident. It allows you to ask better questions. It gets you excited. That excitedness, that confidence, people buy from people who they like and trust.
Yeah.
And that even comes across in a Zoom call. I think it somehow comes across in an email and a LinkedIn connection. So
Yeah.
that's really how it all ties together. Sorry for the rambling
No,
response, but
no,
yeah,
that's perfect. I mean, it's just I'm listening intently, just trying to grasp it all the knowledge that you're sharing here. I mean, a lot of it I 100% agree with. Um, I have another question here that's more centered around. So I think there's a few things in the B2B space specifically.
Mhm.
When we're selling to other companies or selling some kind of software or service to another company. Um, I feel like a lot of times it's been such a fast growing space within the past decade that we adopted, I think, a lot of like these metrics, like you mentioned, open rates and blah blah blah, those that are somewhat inconsequential,
Mhm.
but we've taken or adopted it from like the consumer space for whatever reason, and it doesn't match as a one for one, especially in B2B. The typical narrative is like, how is this either improving top line revenue or improving bottom line margins? And it doesn't necessarily always have to be
Mhm.
financially related. And when it comes to like improving bottom line margins, it may be the byproduct, but it's going to be depending on who you're selling to. It's going to either be something that's financial or it's going to be a time saving component to it.
Mhm.
And so it's very tangible to me in terms of what a B2B product or service is supposed to do. Um, and it boggles my mind a lot of times that like how salespeople are still like selling with the intent of just getting somebody to buy versus trying to solve a problem and
Yeah.
understand, is there a fit with the, I mean, it's like taking their product or solution and providing it and seeing if there's actual fit there.
Mhm.
Um, and that obviously comes back down to, I think, the bigger problem, which is like a lot of companies don't do a great job of like understanding their ICPs or their ideal customer profiles. And they think their TAM is like this $1 billion market when in practicality, it might actually be a tenth of that or, a third of that, right? So talk to me a little bit about like how much you emphasize selling versus like problem solving or finding
Yeah.
that fit, um, because I think that's really important. That ultimately does affect a lot of those conversion metrics that you talked about, like improving for optimization around, the more learn mores, the more turning into customers, etc.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, even though I use the word sales and I use the word selling a lot, it's really not that. It's creating buyers. Uh, so in the B2B space specifically, and that's where I do 99% of my work, keynote speaking and things, is there's a few things you got to remember. One, and this is a made up number, but I think it's pretty accurate based on my experience. What you offer has to be 10x better than what I'm currently doing most of the time, right? So it's got to be, it can't just be a little bit better. It's got to be a lot bit better. Now, you could argue with me, you could say, well, we're way cheaper. I'm like, okay, maybe that's a good selling. I don't know. I don't think that's very fun to be in the low price game, but okay. So you got to be 10x better. The the core components of relevance are the same, maybe even more important. What are their goals? What are their fears? What are their care abouts?
Mm.
Now, what you also have to identify in a B2B sale is generally, not always, but generally, there's multiple decision makers. And every one of those decision makers, or there could be one ultimate decision maker, but a number of influencers
Yep.
in the sale. And there is going to be some naysayers. It's like, oh, I don't want this because if we get this, my job is no longer needed, right? There's going to be those people. You have to understand their goals, fears, and care abouts. And the more expensive the product, the more expensive the solution, the deeper you need to go on those and understand that. And then I guess the other key in selling B2B is this whole concept of sales triggers, which is also a B2C, but a B2B a lot. What's a sales trigger is why does somebody need me today where they didn't need me 3 weeks ago?
Yep.
So depending what you're selling, maybe you're selling, again, e-commerce software, right? Why? Well, do I already have an e-commerce system? So what are my goals? What are my fears? What are my care abouts? If I'm, are you 10x better than what I'm currently doing? Maybe the answer is yes. All right, still, I might not close the deal because what are the goals? Well, my goal is I want to create, I want to, using this as a hypothetical scenario. I'm selling e-commerce software to you, Chris, yeah, you've already said, Sam, what you have is 10x better than I have. Great. That doesn't mean you're going to buy. I still have to tap into your goals. Well, what are your goals? Well, my goal is if I could create efficiency with my e-commerce system, that will free up money that I could spend on advertising. But what are your fears? My fear is by switching, this looks great, Sam, but if it doesn't work, I'm right. So even though I've already recognized you're 10x better, and I already recognize that you're going to help me hit my goals, my fear is pretty strong. And what are my care abouts? Well, my care about is, I'm making this up. Yeah, I've got 2 new kids. I've got a brand new house. I can't afford to lose my job. And this decision, I'm not going to, my care abouts are, if I make this decision, I'm not going to get a bonus. But if I make this decision and it's wrong, I will get fired.
Yeah.
So how do you overcome those?
Yeah.
Now, again, those could be sales triggers. So a sales trigger might be you're going through a merger or an acquisition. You've launched a new product. You've launched a new division. You're relocating your company. You've got a new boss. So what are those things that I can tap into that can help alleviate some of those fears and help accentuate some of the goals and the care abouts?
Yeah. Makes sense. We're running up on time here, but I've got 2 more points that I
Sure.
wanted to kind of ask. Number one is this idea of attention, right? So I think not enough salespeople think about urgency. And I just know from my experience that there is a real time decay with attention. So literally, like if you don't get back to somebody within the first 30 minutes of them responding to you in whatever channel or format, like uh their consciousness of like your existence start declining. Like if you don't get back to them until a week later, if in some cases I've seen that, like you're probably not going to get a meeting, or you're
Yeah.
probably it's dramatically decline. I think when we ran numbers before, when we were in an agency format, we noticed that if we didn't get back to them within the first hour, our chances of getting them into a demo of some sort for a client would decrease from like 80% to 30%.
Wow.
And yeah, and I think so we became very conscientious around like instantaneously monitoring those things. Your thoughts on that, like in terms of like attention, being attentive to the buyer's attention span, and how do you think about that when you do get a positive signal, and how do you capitalize on that in those moments most effectively?
Yeah, that's a great point. And as someone who deals with that every day, right? So I've got multiple buyers. I've got on the technology side, and I've got on the event planner side. And the event planner could be a CEO, HR, VP of sales, whoever it is. In my world, there's 50,000 great keynote speakers. And so if I don't answer right away, they're going to go to somebody else.
Yeah.
And there have been times, I have to tell you, in my past where I didn't get back to somebody within a day, and they've gotten back, when I did get back, we already made a different decision. Right?
Yeah.
So, I hate to say it, but, and I even hate to admit this, but I have my phone sitting next to me at night, and I do get emails, live chats at 3 a.m, and I hear my phone go off and I respond. I wish I didn't. I don't know an alternative.
Yeah.
Maybe generative AI, maybe we can automate some of those things moving forward, but I don't know. I think you're right. And we just have to recognize that, especially as entrepreneurs,
Yep.
when someone's reaching out to us, if we don't answer quickly, they will go to an alternative because it's really easy for them to find an alternative. Now, the good news is the number of times where I do get back to somebody right away, I would say more than half the time, the response I get is, A, are you the real person? because they think I'm a bot. Or it'll be, oh my goodness, I didn't expect to reach you, right? Or it will be, well, I've never had such great customer support before. There are a number of times when I answer the phone and there'll be a pause and I'm like, oh God, it's another one of these robocalls. And then they'll say, is this Sam? And I'll say, yes. And they'll say, I didn't expect you to answer your phone. Like, who would you expect to answer my phone? I don't know. So the good news is for those of us who do recognize that time is of the essence, it can be a huge differentiator.
Yeah.
The bad news is I
Time is
guess
of
I've
the essence.
never, I look at my parents, right? Like when I was growing up, we used to go on a 2-week vacation and there was no cell phones. There was like my parents actually had a 2-week vacation.
Yeah.
I don't even know what a vacation is, right? I mean, I do and I don't. I'm always connected. So it's I wouldn't say that's a positive thing, but it's if you're going to be one of those folks that well, no one's going to take away from my time. Good for you, man. You've got great life balance.
Yeah.
And I hope I really, and I'm saying this genuinely, to see somebody who says they have work-life balance, I'm jealous. I just don't know how to do it any other way.
Yeah. I hear you on that. Um, we're up on time, so I want to, first of all, say thank you for
Yeah,
taking the
thank you.
and just lastly here, if you have any additional gold nuggets that you'd like to share to our listeners, any marketing and sales professionals out there, maybe any tidbit advice that you typically leave at the end of a keynote
Mhm.
speech.
Yeah,
Feel
great.
free.
I would say the biggest one is really encompassing what we've talked about today and just be genuine and authentic and understand that it's not about you, it's about them. When you really put the other person first. And I have to tell you, I've won a lot of business as a speaker saying, you know what, I'm not a good fit for this year's conference. Let me tell you who is. So I actually recommend my competitor. And it's amazing that they come back the next year. So I think just genuinely putting the other person first and their care-abouts first and their goals first actually creates more revenue over time.
Yeah,
But you have to be patient, but it will create revenue over time.
1000%. Um, Thank you so much, Sam, for taking the time. This is great. This is super insightful. I learned a lot. Um, and it's great to hear another person out there kind of, I think, going down the same belief trajectory as I am. So again, thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you very much.